Good morning. Today we have a very special opportunity to hear from Dr. Mark Hyman about why we need a food fix. Fixing our food, or more accurately, fixing our dysfunctional food system, the way we grow, produce, distribute, and promote unhealthy food products, is the most important challenge that faces our world today. In his latest book, Food Fix, Dr. Hyman provides an avalanche of data that will convince you of the depth and the shocking extent of the problem, and even more importantly, what you personally can do about it. I read Food Fix cover to cover in 2 days. I couldn't put it down, and I haven't stopped talking about it and urging everyone I know to read it since. As I wrote Mark when asking him if he would be able to squeeze in this interview for us, I believe Food Fix is his most important book to date. And that's saying a lot. I've been truly blessed to know Mark for close to 30 years now, and I have watched him become a 10-time #1 New York Times bestselling author, an internationally recognized leader, speaker, and educator, and a leading advocate of functional medicine. Mark has been on the board of the Institute for Functional Medicine since its inception. He recently served as board chair, and he continues to be a very active and highly valued member of the IFM board. He's the head of strategy and innovation at the incredibly successful Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine, and he's the founder and medical director of the Ultra Wellness Center in Lenox, Massachusetts, where he somehow still manages to see patients. Obviously, he's figured out how to clone himself, or more likely, he's probably the best example of the abundant health and vitality that the medicine that he practices delivers. I've left out a very long list of Mark's additional accomplishments, but if I share them all, no time will remain for this interview. So, welcome, Dr. Hyman, and thank you so much for taking this time for this interview with us. Let's talk about Food Fix.
Hi, Lara. It's so great to be with you.
So few doctors spend time asking their patients about the food that they eat. Why did you become so interested?
Well, it just was obvious, right? If most chronic disease is caused by food, it's not going to be fixed by pills and surgery. And it's important to think about the food your patients are eating if the diseases are suffering from are food related. And so I just began to go down that rabbit hole, and it's a very, very deep rabbit hole that is incredibly rich in solutions for so many of the problems that we face today, whether it's heart disease, diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, autoimmune diseases, mood disorders, ADD, autism. I mean, you name it, across the spectrum of chronic illness, which affects 6 out of 10 of us, food is the #1 culprit and the #1 cure.
So why did you take the plunge down that proverbial rabbit hole and investigate food policies that perpetuate the system that promotes ill health? Can you share some of your adventures in Washington land?
Yeah, sure. I mean, so, it was really clear to me that, I've been working with food for so long with my patients, but it was sort of it was sort of like plugging trying to bail a boat that has a big hole in it. And I'm like, well, if my patients are sick from food, well, why are they eating the food they're eating? It's not just because they're bad people or they don't have good judgment. It's because the food system is providing the kind of food that is ubiquitous and toxic and deadly. And so the goal was really to think about, well, why do we have the food system we have? And it's because of our food policies. And why do we have the food policies we have? Is because of our food lobby, that the food industry is driving those policies. And that's, just one example. The GMO labeling law was introduced in 2015, and almost every other country has this law, including Russia and China, which labels GMO, not known as for their transparency as democracies and countries. But in this country, the food industry in 1 year spent $192 million to fight this bill. So you can imagine there's not very many nonprofits or public health advocacy groups that have $192 million to spend to fight one bill. And I think that's what we're up against. And so we really have to think about, ways in which we can educate lawmakers and we can drive policy change, and we can educate consumers and connect the dots between all the aspects of the food system that are driving our healthcare crisis, driving chronic disease epidemic, driving the economic burden of it all, leading to climate change, environmental destruction, social justice issues, health disparities, even national security problems. So I think we have to connect the dots, and the Food Fix book was an attempt to connect those dots, tell the story of what's actually happening, and then provide a map for solutions of how do we begin to solve this problem together. And because there are really great solutions. It's not like we don't know what to do. It's like not with COVID, like we're trying to race to find a vaccine or race to find a new drug. We have the answers. It's not hard to do. I see patients who just transform their diets and reverse diabetes and heart disease, and kidney failure. I mean, it's just stuff that you wouldn't think is possible using food, but it is.
You mentioned in Food Fix that government recommendations tell us that 50% of our diet should be fruits and vegetables, and 2% of our farmland is used to grow them. And instead, 59% of our farmland is used to grow corn, wheat, and soy that then get turned into what the medical literature is now calling ultra-processed food.
Yes.
And ultra here is not a good thing. Can you tell us a little bit about what these ultra-processed foods are and why they're making us sick?
Sure. I mean, we end-to-end have a food system and food policy that drives the growing, the processing, and the selling and the distribution of very poor quality foods that are nutrient depleted, that are derived from the commodity crops that our government supports, corn, wheat, and soy primarily, that are grown in large monocrop fields, that are intensively farmed with agrochemicals, pesticides, herbicides like glyphosate, fertilizers, all of which have enormous environmental consequences. The way we farm destroys the soil, leading to climate change. And so we basically have a system that is producing ultra processed food at such a scale that it's now 60% of our calories. And for every 10% of our calories that's ultra processed food, our risk of death goes up by 14%. So you do the math there, 6 times 14 is a lot. And I think, we see 11 million people a year die globally from ultra processed food and not enough of the protective or good foods. I think that's an underestimate because 3/4 of the deaths in the world are from chronic disease, and again, most of those are influenced by diet. So I think it depends how you slice it or define it. But this is a pandemic of historic proportions that's not even named. I mean, everybody talks about COVID, and yes, it's horrible that so many people have died, but it pales into comparison to the number of people that die every day from diabetes or heart disease or things that are completely preventable that we're not addressing.
So can you give us a brief overview of the guiding principles of the health promoting diet that you recommend, and have jokingly called the I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it correctly, Pegan diet?
Yeah, the Pegan diet.
Pegan diet. Yeah, our listeners should know that you provide a great summary of this in Food Fix, and that you've written 2 entire books discussing, the no fads, no health promoting diet, food, what the heck can I eat, and what the heck should I cook? But can you give us a few of the high points today?
Sure. I mean, my new book's coming out in February called The Pegan Diet. So it's actually, I got so much pressure to what is it and how do you do it? And so essentially it's where, science meets common sense, meets a regenerative philosophy, right?
Right, yeah.
So the whole idea is, how do we regenerate human health, and how do we regenerate planetary health and the soil and climate and everything else? How do we regenerate communities? And food plays such a key part of it. And the principles around health are things that we can all agree on. I jokingly called it Pegan because it's a spoof on paleo and vegan, which are so extreme. But in fact, when you look carefully at the principles of each of those ways of eating or philosophies, they mirror each other far more than they do the traditional or standard American diet. So they have far more in common with each other than the stuff that everybody else sees in America. They all agree that we should be eating whole foods. They all agree that we should be eating lots of fruits and vegetables. They all agree we should be eating unprocessed foods that aren't full of chemicals, additives, preservatives, GMO, hormones, antibiotics. I mean, nobody's like, oh, let's do more of that. Most philosophies agree that we should be eating good fats, that we should be having nuts and seeds, that we should be having, if we're having animal foods, I think we should have animal foods that are raised in regenerative ways, that actually restore soil, that are more humane, that actually promote health more than the feedlot animals, which do all the opposite. They're not good for you or the animals or the planet, and it should be banned. But that's not a meat is bad, meat is good argument. It's like what meat and how and where and so forth. So I think it's really those simple principles that and we can all agree on, and we should cut out starch and sugar for the most part, have them as a recreational treat, but not as a daily staple, which is what we now have most of our calories being sugar and starch. So it's just these simple guiding principles, and they're adaptable to a wide variety of cultural and dietary preferences. And it's delicious and good for you and good for the planet and good for everything.
I can't wait for the next book.
I so jokingly call it a vegetarian diet. It's like, how do we, right?
Oh yeah, that makes sense. So your audience here is largely people that have bone health issues, osteoporosis, osteopenia. Do you have any recommendations about foods that are, you think might be most helpful?
Well, you're probably more of an expert on that than I am, but I mean, I think it's the obvious things that, you want the nutrients that actually are going to help build bone: magnesium, calcium rich foods, which are a lot of plant foods, nuts and seeds, beans. I think also, certain things like vitamin D are critical and, they're hard to get from food, but you can have wild fish like sardines or herring. You can have certain mushrooms that are higher in vitamin D. And I think, we want foods that are rich in those, and vitamin K2, so keeping your gut healthy. So I think there's a lot of simple strategies, and I think what most people don't realize around diet and osteoporosis is that it's not just what you eat or how much calcium you take in or minerals you take in, it's what you put out. And I think it's really more about calcium balance than it is about getting a quote enough calcium, because there are cultures that have 300 milligrams of calcium a day and have no osteoporosis. And it's because they're not doing all those things that cause us to excrete or lose calcium, or essentially pee out our bone, which include things like smoking and alcohol and sugar, stress, phosphoric acid in sodas is a huge one, which is really big. Excess salt, and maybe some argument about excess animal protein as well. So I think there's some real simple principles of how to really slow down the process of bone loss, and then you've got to actually do the exercise part to help build it up. Or of course,
well, somebody's following the Pegan diet.
Yeah,
I got it right that time. Okay, the Pegan diet. It'll pretty much cover these things.
It will actually, yes.
Okay, good. So what was most amazing to me about Food Fix is not just the stupendous amount of research that you assembled to verify and connect the dots, but the hundreds of groups that are already engaged in trying to fix the problem that you highlighted. Could you share your thoughts on these grassroots efforts? I mean, are we just dreaming to think that such groups can really bring about meaningful change?
Well, think about all the meaningful changes happened in the history of our country, right? We've had abolition. We've had women's suffrage, we've had civil rights, we've had women's rights, we've had gay rights. So I think things that seemed impossible, might take 100 years. but I think that, cultures shift and consciousness changes, and I think we're in an era where there'll be a tipping point, and people will really begin to move this forward, and it becomes untenable not to act. Like climate change, how long can you ignore climate change? And I think right now we're seeing wildfires and hurricanes, and it's unprecedented. And it's not just because there's extra leaves on the floor of the forest. I think there's some real challenges we're facing environmentally, and we can't ignore it. And I think the same way, I think these consumer groups, these public health groups, the advocacy groups, they're all working toward the same direction. I'm working with a crew now, looking at how do we bring regenerative agriculture into policy, and working with Kiss the Ground, which is coming out, a movie coming out September 22nd on Netflix. It's about regenerative agriculture, and how do we begin to think about who do we, in the next administration, how do we work towards bringing some of these policies into effect, of soil conservation and so forth. I mean, soil conservation is not a new thing. I mean, the Soil Conservation Service was started by Franklin Roosevelt after the Dust Bowl, and it's sort of changed the name. It still exists, but it hasn't really focused on how do we really build and keep soil, which needs to happen. So I think these groups are moving in that direction, and are pushing things forward.
And you do provide a lot of options for people to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, people can go to foodfixbook.com, and there's a Food Fix action guide with a lot of different ideas around what you can do personally. If you're a business owner, what you can do. If you're a philanthropist, a policymaker, if you're interested in getting involved in any level, there's really clear guidelines about what you can do to start.
Well, I think Food Fix is definitely a manifesto for real positive change. And I am so encouraged for the first time in a very long time,
Oh, thank
along
you.
with all of us here at AlgaeCal. We want to do everything that we can to help get your health reclaiming message out to reach more people. So I would like to end our interview with a request to everyone here who's watching this on our AlgaeCal community. Please read this book. Dr. Hyman is a great writer, very entertaining. You probably already picked up from this morning. I promise that the book is an entertaining read, and I wish you would read it and share it with your friends and take the actions that Dr. Hyman is recommending to protect yourself and those you love. Join the Food RX campaign to become part of this effort for positive change. I have, and we'll do everything.
You can go to, yeah, you can go to foodfix.org and sign up for more information for sure.
Okay, is there anything, I know you're really pressed for time, and I greatly appreciate that you took the time out this morning for us. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we sign off? Any message?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, eating is an act of choosing your health or not. Eating is an agricultural act because you're choosing where your food comes from, and it's a political act. And I think people need to understand the implications of the food they put at the end of their fork, because it's connected to a whole web of a food system that can either promote regeneration and healing of humanity and the planet, or it can destroy it. And I think we have a destructive system now, both in terms of healthcare and agriculture, that can be changed. And I think we're in a really exciting moment where I think it's the beginning of that possibility.
All right, well, we'll all work together and we will make it happen. Thank you for giving us your time and your many insights. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you, Lara.
Hope for our ability to heal our health and economy and communities and our planet. And
oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
Have a wonderful day. Okay, I think we're signing off.
That's great. Thanks, Lara. That was really awesome. Thanks for having me on it.
You're awesome, Mark.
Okay.
Right. Have a great rest of your day. All
right. Bye.
Well, now that we've allowed Mark to escape to his incredibly intense back-to-back schedule, I would like to share with you a graphic that I created to help you connect the dots from all the issues that Dr. Hyman so convincingly covers in Food Fix to the health of our bones. I will do my best to explain this graphic in an upcoming video, but I want to tell you there is no doubt that our dysfunctional food system promotes bone loss. And there's a lot you can do to protect yourself. So in the next video in which I see you, I will be discussing those connections and what you can do. Have a wonderful day.